Okay, I'm Stuart Cranian from the Thinkers 50. We have Lars Sorensen, Michael Porter, and Marshall Goldsmith, looking like three wise men at this particular moment. Let's start with a question. What's your question?
Which significance do you think that Thinkers 50 has to Odense?
Repeat the question.
Significance for
How significant is the Thinkers 50 for this city?
for this city or the city?
Or how can it be?
Yeah. For the city.
Yeah,
city
perhaps I
comfort.
should answer that
Yes.
one with a little bit of local knowledge of the
Yes.
city, having lived just south of here for a number of years. This is a region which has struggled creating new companies and jobs. And my expectation would be that if this conference is successful, it will attract eventually companies to identify this area as quite attractive area in terms of location, connectivity, labor, wonderful quality of life, affordable housing. We can't do much about the weather, but I think eventually this could lead to growth of jobs in the region.
Jane?
Yes, I have a few questions. My first question is about the women aspect. Because during your talk with Lars Rebian, we touched upon the concept of women in business, especially upon the lack of feminine top leaders. I think one could argue that that is a real societal problem. So I was wondering, Michael Porter, what are your thoughts about women in top business? And is it possible to apply a CSV answer to that problem? Because obviously the philanthropic answer would be just hiring women because they are women. That would not really solve the core problem. So could you tell me about your thoughts about that?
Well, I think that there's sort of a growing body of knowledge that women not only just have innate talent and skills that like men, but that women also approach management in a little bit different way, have some complementary assets and strengths. So I think a company needs to have the workforce that first of all can run the company well, but there's also this idea that you want your employees and your workforce and your management team to reflect your customers, in many cases which are women. So I think there's a movement going. I think it's starting to take off. We are seeing more CEOs of really big companies now in the United States that are women. I run a workshop for new CEOs, and we have women now almost every time, and so they're doing well. And so I think this has been a long battle. It's a long struggle, but I think we're starting to get traction.
But it was interesting. It was a recurring theme: the need to open up the higher echelons of corporations to all talent throughout the 2 days. I was going to ask you, Michael, about do you get a different response in Europe when you talk about shared value, given our different welfare systems in Europe?
Well, I think I wouldn't say I get a different response. I think the model here has been different. Government has been looked to do a lot of this stuff. I think in some sense that historically heavy role of government is a bit of a handicap because it's distracted. It's made some companies think, oh no, this is not for us. This is not our job. I think in the U.S. It's become a little more natural that government has had a smaller role. Companies sort of see more obviously the need to dive into this. But I don't know. I'd be interested in what Marshall says.
Marshall, do you detect a different attitude towards business?
Yeah, I think the one challenge that came up in the conversation that I participated in was the concept of comfort. Comfort is a blessing and comfort is a curse. And so many people here, I said it, but I was surprised to hear so many people here say it, that one of the major challenges in innovation in Europe is comfort. That when people are comfortable, they're not actually stretching quite as much. They're not looking at solving the big problem as when they're discomfort. So that was a fascinating theme that came out in yesterday's conversation.
I think Lars has done okay from this comfort zone.
Yeah, but it's, in reality, we ought to have the conditions for entrepreneurship with the social model that we have. But what we fail to perhaps have is financing model that can take these startups over this cliff of despair and building them into real companies. It's interesting that in the future, I'll be representing one of the largest foundations in Northern Europe, where we will be reinvesting the proceeds that come from the shared value earnings of Novo Nordisk and Novozymes into building a life science ecosystem. And so this is actually the next step of seeing how corporations can provide means for broader societal issues such as education, stimulate regional development, and so forth. So I'm looking forward to this very much because I can see the clear link between my role as CEO and the value that we created at that time, and how these monies should be spent as respectfully as they were earned originally. And so I look forward to that very much.
We've talked a lot about the job of the CEO in the last couple of days, and I wondered, Marshall and Michael, were you ever tempted to be CEO of a corporation? Or I know you developed the Monitor consulting firm.
Well, I've started one for-profit, and I think I'm on number 4 nonprofit at this point, and I enjoy it and actively involved. But I think what my gift is I have the ability to see across industries and across companies, and I'm kind of an engineer, aeronautical engineer by training, and so I was always hesitant to take away that opportunity, which is I have this unique platform at HBS to kind of look very broadly, and now that's cut across lots of different issues. And I think I probably would have never done the work I did if I would have kind of homed in too narrowly on one industry.
And I'm kind of the opposite. So my area of expertise is micro level, and I'm really only an expert at helping successful people achieve positive long-term change in behavior. So in your case, you don't want to narrow down that much. I don't want to go out that much. Yeah. So I'm kind of
we have the micro, the macro, and the doer.
Well, I thought, Lars, I thought you were going to say you always wanted to be a business school professor, really.
No. That would be too hard work for me.
What about, I said when we were talking, we had a lot of students there today. And what would be your message to them?
Well, I think Michael actually picked it quite correctly in that there are very, very significant societal and social problem that needs to be resolved. We need to share the wealth that is being created in a different way than we have up until now. The system we've had of capitalism up until now has got us into this mess we are in. And I'm very worried that if we don't find a different way of seeing the role of corporations and sharing value from corporations into society in a different way, and some countries are better at it than others, then we'll end up in huge conflicts. And so these young people that are getting into the workforce with the courage and the lack of experience will tackle these problems, because they're not like us. We've tried so many things and failed. So I think they're going to have a fantastic time.
Marshall?
The advice I would give young people is Peter Drucker taught me a wonderful lesson many years ago. Our mission is to make a positive difference, not to prove we're smart, not to prove we're right. Really focus on, and he said, whoever has the power to make the decision makes the decision. Your mission should be to, if the decision maker is going to make a difference, you need to know how to sell. You sell decision makers, you change what you can change, you make peace with what you can change, and really focus your life where you can make a difference. Don't waste your time on what you're not going to change anyway.
One final question from me. Michael, what does the Lifetime Achievement Award mean to you? Because obviously, as Des said, we recognise your continuing contribution.
Well, yeah, I'm not done, but I guess what you really treasure in life is being recognized by your peers, and I've really had a long-term goal of kind of taking on an increasing array of issues where we had complexity and where we had a lot of complicated things that had to come together to try to understand what was driving the world. And what I've come to see is these issues interconnect over time. So I'm delighted that I hopefully deserve this, and and it'll motivate me to do more.
Well, perhaps Marshall and Lars should comment on that. Jane, do you want to ask a question?
During these 2 days, we've talked a lot about failure, about the importance of daring to make mistakes, because the things you learn from your failures can bring companies forward. So I was wondering, Mr. Porter, if you would share your own biggest mistake with us.
Gosh, that's a new question. Well, you know, I don't know. It's hard to say that I don't feel bad about anything. All the mistakes turned into good things. You know, just it's. The first time I wrote competitive strategy, this is historic. First time I wrote a whole book, and I put it down for a month, and then I looked at it again, and I threw it away. And it just wasn't right. It wasn't there. It wasn't correct. And it was that, and that, you know, wasted year turned into something really powerful, because I got a tremendous jolt of energy to kind of rethink everything I was doing. And so, I mean, that's kind of like having a business and going bankrupt, you know, and then having to restart it. But I can only say it was tremendously beneficial. So I think that the idea that struggling and failing with things is actually part of learning and succeeding and getting resilient and making a contribution, I think is one of those lessons. And I think too often people step away from stuff that's too challenging and want to feel in a safety zone where they feel they're mastering something. And I think we have to push ourselves outside of where we feel mastery if we're going to have innovation.
That's a good answer to your question.
Thank you.
How has it been staying here in Odense, in the city?
Well, it's been very short. I've only been here this day, but I must be, as Lars was saying, there's a vitality here, and frankly, I didn't expect it. I just thought I was coming to a reasonably small city in middle of Denmark, and the real cool stuff was happening in Copenhagen. And what I found was, you know, just everybody I've run into in so many different ways is telling a story about change in economic development, and that's a whole part of my work is doing. I work with a lot of states and cities and regions and around the world, and what's happening here is really quite remarkable. And hopefully it'll be a story that gets written.
And Michael, how do you? I mean, there's a robotics and drones cluster here.
Yeah.
How do you sustain a cluster?
Well, if you have the right assets, it sustains itself. That's the great thing about clusters, is that they're mutually reinforcing, and the more you've got a lot of people competing and watching each other in a sort of a common ecosystem, the ecosystem gets better. People move around from company to company. It's the Silicon Valley effect. I mean, and so it is self-sustaining. But the question, you got to get it to a certain critical mass, so that starts to happen. I sense that that's happening here.
Yeah. Lars, do you think there is that critical mass?
Well, there is no doubt that the region here has been challenged historically. That's probably also what drives the energy and the vitality. The need drives it. They're not being spoiled around here because everybody has moved either to the east or to the west. So it's a region which is in the middle of Denmark, and it's been usually considered the region you just pass through when you go from west to east. And I think that generates vitality. But I think the municipality and the local government here will need to do some strategic thinking about how to develop that further. And how to then develop the other parts of the region, what they will be good at and what they can offer, because you cannot spread these type of things too thinly. As Michael says, you got to have a certain critical mass. So I'm hopeful that Odense will be able to build that, and that other parts of Fyn, the region, will find their own niche, because it's just certainly one of the most lovely parts of Denmark.
Perhaps the three of you should write a book together. They would sit.
I think it's Lars' turn to write a book.
Yeah, yeah.
told him that already. I've already told him.
Lars is lagging
I
behind.
had two guys on my back.
To be fair to Lars, he did have a day job.
He does it now.
Yeah, he did.
It's only half a job.
That's great.
Okay, I think. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yay. Thank you. That was fun.
That's fun. Thanks,
It was
Marshall.
fun.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, Laura.